Once upon a time, there was a young woman named Clara, who never trusted mirrors, not because she hated her reflection, but because sometimes she swore the glass showed things that weren't really there. She had lived her whole life, pushing those fleeting visions aside, chalked them up to stress, exhaustion, or tricks of the light. But deep inside, Clara knew they meant something more, something she wasn't ready to face. Clara was 27, working nights at a diner in a small coastal town. To anyone watching, her life seemed simple too simple. Even she lived alone in a rented attic apartment above an old bookstore, spent her mornings scribbling into a battered leather journal, and her evenings serving coffee to strangers who barely noticed her. But Clara carried her flaws like heavy stones in her pocket. She was quiet when she should have spoken, stubborn when she should have forgiven, and afraid of letting anyone close enough to hurt her again. The truth was, Clara had been running for years, not from a person, but from a memory she never dared to name out loud. Every time she thought she was safe, it slipped back into her mind like a shadow crawling beneath a locked door. That night, the diner was almost empty. Rain battered against the windows, and the only sound inside was the hum of the old refrigerator behind the counter. Clara wiped down the tables, humming softly, when she noticed a man sitting in the farthest booth. She was sure the place had been empty a moment ago. His face was hidden under the brim of a hat, his coat dripping rainwater onto the vinyl seat. He hadn't ordered. He hadn't moved. Clara tightened her grip on the rag. "Coffee?" she asked, forcing her voice to sound casual. The man didn't look up. Instead, he slid something across the table, toward Hera, folded piece of paper, damp at the edges. Clara hesitated before reaching for it. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded the note. One line, scrawled in jagged handwriting. "You can't keep running from the truth." Her throat went dry. She blinked, looked up. The booth was empty. The door hadn't opened. No footsteps, no trace of him, just the faint outline of water dripping where he had sat. Clara's heart pounded so hard she thought it would burst from her chest. Intermission, 30 seconds of suspense to hold viewers. What would you do if a stranger appeared out of nowhere, handed you a message about the very secret you've buried deepest, and then vanished without a trace? Clara's story is just beginning, and what she's about to discover will make you question how well you know yourself. Clara shoved the note into her apron pocket and tried to shake it off as exhaustion. Maybe her mind was slipping again. Maybe she'd imagined him. But the wet seat, that was real. When her shift ended, she stepped out into the rain, clutching her jacket tight. The streets were empty, the town asleep. She crossed the narrow road toward her apartment, her boots splashing through puddles. Every shadow seemed to stretch too far. Every sound of dripping rain felt like footsteps behind her. By the time she reached her attic room, she was shaking. She locked the door, bolted the windows, and pulled out the note again. The words hadn't blurred away. They stared back at her like a wound. "You can't keep running from the truth." Truth about what? About her past. About the night she never spoke of. The night her sister vanished. Clara pressed her hands to her face, tears stinging her eyes. She never told anyone about that night. No one should know. Suddenly, the mirror across the room flickered. For a split second, Clara saw not her reflection but a pale girl standing behind her, hair dripping with water, lips parted as though whispering her name. She spun around. The room was empty. Her pulse roared in her ears. She stumbled backward until her knees hit the bed. She wanted to scream, but the sound caught in her throat. Instead, she whispered to herself, "It's not real. It's not real. I'm just tired. But the mirror disagreed. This time, the glass didn't flicker. It showed her standing there, trembling. But with one terrifying difference, her reflection was smiling. Once upon a time, there was a young woman named Clara who never trusted mirrors. Not because she hated her reflection, but because sometimes she swore the glass showed things that weren't really there. For example, when she was 19 and her older sister, Lily, first vanished. Clara distinctly remembers going to the bathroom in their shared bedroom and seeing her sister's reflection in the mirror, even though Lily was nowhere to be found. After that night, Clara never looked in the mirror again until one day, while working a late-night shift at the local diner, when she saw her own reflection for the first time in years. But it wasn't just any ordinary day. As Clara was closing up the diner for the night, she noticed a dripping wet man sitting in one of the booths. He didn't make a sound as he silently approached her and handed her a note that read, "You can't keep running from the truth." Then he vanished without a trace. Startled, Clara looked around for him, but he was nowhere to be seen. She thought about calling the police, but what would she even tell them? A drizzling man in a booth gave her a creepy note and then disappeared. They'd probably just laugh at her and tell her to go home. So Clara did the only thing she could think of. She went back to work, figuring that if the man wanted something from her, he would have to come back. And he did. Every single night, for a week, the same man appeared out of nowhere, drenched in water, handing her the same note, which she kept in her pocket along with the receipt tape from the diner. On the 8th night, when he handed her the note again, she finally had enough courage to ask him, "What do you want?" The man didn't answer. He just stared at her with an unreadable expression before disappearing again. It was only then that Clara noticed he wasn't carrying the note, so she took it out of her pocket and read, "You can't keep running from the truth. Meet me in the bathroom," signed off with the same dripping water symbol he made in the booth. Unsure what to do, Clara followed him into the bathroom and locked the door behind her. But when she turned around, the man was gone. In his place was a note that read, "I know what you're hiding. Meet me at the lake at midnight and bring the receipt tape." With shaking hands, Clara did as she was told. When she arrived at the lake, she saw the man sitting on a nearby rock. He looked up at her and smiled, revealing a face covered in cryptic tattoos. Then he reached out his hand, palm up, and said, "Show me the receipt tape." And that's when Clara realized the terrifying truth. The man wasn't there to hurt her. He was there to help her remember what happened to her sister all those years ago. Because, as it turns out, Lily didn't just vanish into thin air. She was murdered by their stepfather, who then framed Clara for the crime. As the memory of that night flooded back to her, Clara screamed, "It wasn't me, it was him." But before she could confess everything, the man pressed his hand against the glass, causing it to crack. And then she saw her own reflection, smiling back at her. Then she saw it. Her reflection was smiling at her. It wasn't her usual self, but something sinister, something that shouldn't be there. And then it did something that made her blood run cold. It pressed its hand against the glass. The mirror cracked. And the end of the story. So please, like, share, subscribe, and comments below. Thank you for watching.